Hey folks, welcome back. It's time for some more writing on this very snowy Wednesday afternoon. I think it's Wednesday afternoon. I've been bunkered in my apartment since Monday afternoon when I got home from work, approximately an hour and a half after I left work, between needing to stop and grab a few things on the way home and the fact that the buses were running about 10 to 15 minutes late. So yeah. For those of you who don't know, I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we have gotten probably about 18 inches to 2 feet of snow where I'm at. And so it's been interesting the past few days. The university where I got my first bachelor's and where I'm back for my second, they've been closed now for 3 days and will be closed again tomorrow. So we might have another light white right stream tomorrow, in addition to what we have going on. But today we are going to go back to working on Lost and Found. We'll continue from the scene where we left off in the last right stream. So if you caught the last right stream, you kind of have an idea of what's going on. So yeah, with a little further ado, we're gonna kick on over. Um, However, I do want to give you guys kind of an idea of the environment currently going on outside my window. My computer is set up so it faces my slider at my apartment. So typically, if I open my shears, I have a really nice view of like the parking lot and the building across the street. And we have a little wooded area off to one side that I have a nice view of from my slider. And right now, the world looks something like this. Um, that big empty space right in front of you, in that picture there, that there was a car there. I think they shoveled themselves out at about 11 this morning. The car immediately to its right, I did see the person who owned that car out there shoveling that off earlier today. And as you can see, we've already gotten quite a bit more snow since they shoveled off their windshield earlier today. If I were to walk outside right now, I would probably be at least to mid calf, if not knee deep in snow. So yeah, it's been an interesting few days in West Michigan, and apparently is going to be a little bit interesting for a couple of days to come because by Saturday it's supposed to be raining. So I'm really not sure how that's going to work out. But yeah, so fun times, right? Fun times all around. So, for those of you who joined me last time we did a right stream, you have some idea of where the story is. For anyone who didn't, who missed the last stream, right now we are working on UNSETIC Files Lost and Found, which takes place immediately following the events of Bearing Songs in Silence, in which Bridget and Tim are assigned to each other and actually kind of formally start working together. Lost and Found starts with A.J. McConaughey getting a phone call saying, "Hey, your brother's alive and he's here." Which, for anyone who's read The Measure of Dreams, knows is kind of a big deal for Kate and AJ. So that sets off a chain of events that eventually culminates in them bringing Tim back to Chicago with them. And now they've gone beyond the portals trying to find some answers to why Tim and to why Tim is back, how he got back, and why no one knew that he was back. So yeah, we're gonna have some fun here. They have actually gone to a planet called Mightyar, where after hooking up with their friend Triskel, who's a portal walker too, and now they're on Mightyar and they are talking to Bjartur Zanali, who is a master smith who actually happens to be the person who made Tim's armor when he worked for the Cabal and his sword when he worked for the Cabal. And Bjartur is kind of an interesting character. He's really kind of more on the side of the resistance to the Cabal, but he plays nice with the Cabal because it's safer that way. And because he has his own little subversive quirks and his own little subversive things that he does to to kind of help bring down the Cabal a little bit. But that's where we're at. Bjarter just opened the door to the forge. I'll read you guys the last few paragraphs before we before I get started writing. So we'll start with, I don't want to go back to the whole beginning of the chapter. So we'll start here. Okay. Triskel glanced between us and shook her head, slipping past him to open the gate. She strode into the yard, waving for us to follow her. The sound of Beatrice's hammer was muted beyond the door of the forge, but still audible. 2 sections of fence down from the gate, I spotted 2 new rails, their wood brighter, unweathered compared to the rest of the fence, golden blonde wood rather than gray. Kate saw it almost as soon as I did. Whatever happened, I doubt he was very happy. Do you really want to know? I asked her. She snorted. Are you kidding me? I'd love to know, but I've got no intention of asking. That's because you're far more polite than most, Triskel said as she crossed the yard toward the forge door. Oi, Bjarter! I choked in a laugh and Kate snorted. Tim's shoulders shook slightly in suppressed laughter as he closed the gate and reset the latch. Bridget rolled her eyes. I feel like I missed something, she muttered just loudly enough to hear. Not really, Tim assured her. We'll explain that one later. Bridget nodded slowly. Inside the forge, the hammering hadn't stopped, as if Bjarter hadn't heard Triskel or had simply ignored her. The feeling of power in the air, though, was slowly increasing, and it was starting to set the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck on end. You feel that? You feel that, right? Tim said quietly as he moved toward Bridget and I. He hadn't relinquished his grip on Kate's hand, and I could see his fingers flex around hers, gripping a little tighter. I nodded. I feel it. He shivered. I'm glad I'm not the only one. He's working on something, Triskel said as she came within arm's reach of the forge's door. And he's hammering some enchantment into whatever he's working on. A powerful one at that. She hauled open the door unceremoniously. The song crescendoed, and I rocked back against my heels, taking a step back and into Bridget, who caught me and studied me, frowning. What is it? She asked. I realized she couldn't hear it and shivered slightly. You can't feel that? Feel what? My lips thinned. Tim answered. Ambient magic, he said, his voice hushed, almost reverent. Really potent stuff. Magic, she repeated, staring at the two of us with an arched brow. Really? Don't use that tone, Tim said, an edge in his voice. We know you believe. After you didn't die falling in that water, I didn't have a real choice. She turned back toward the forge's open door, slipping past me and heading toward the shadows beyond it. I opened my mouth to yell at her to stop, to wait, but the words died on my tongue as magic crashed over me like a storm tide over breakers. A shudder racked Tim, but he still reached out for my arm, his other hand still tight around Kate's. I've never felt anything like this, he whispered to the two of us, his eyes wide and staring. A tear tracked down his cheek, chased by another. Kate stepped closer. I bit my lip. Triskel peered into the forge. The sound of hammering stopped. You should know better than that, Bjarter growled from within. There was a soft hiss as he plunged whatever he was working on into his quenching trough, and then stepped out into the light of day just before Bridget could enter the forge for a closer look. He squinted at her for a moment, as if committing her face to memory, then turned toward Christelle, cleaning his hands on a rag. There was a healing cut across the bridge of his nose, as if he'd recently been in a fight. Whether it was with a person or something he'd worked on was anyone's guess. He wore his usual heavy leather apron over a thick linen shirt and canvas pants, and blinked a few times to let his eyes adjust to the light outside rather than to the shadows inside. It's been a time, he said, studying Triskel with customary concern. Every time he saw her, he looked her over for new scars, any sign of harm. I'd never quite brought myself to ask what the story behind it all was, figuring eventually one or the other would tell me, and if neither did, then the story behind it really didn't matter all that much. All I'd ever really needed to know was that Triskel trusted him, and that they were both beyond reproach, something I'd learned from experience over the course of my association with both of them. It has, Triskel agreed, reaching up to pat his cheek. It's good to see you. As always, he said, then enfolded her in a hug, neither of them caring overmuch about the soot and otherwise that coated his apron and arms. After he released her a moment later, his gaze drifted back to Bridget, then to me, Kate, and Tim. A faint smile crossed his face, lighting his eyes. You made it home, he said softly, his gaze resting on Tim. My brother squirmed as if uncomfortable, and my mouth went dry. You knew, I managed to choke out. How did you know? How? Piotr echoed, glancing at me. How do you think he made it back? Didn't you leave that stone with me on purpose? Stone? I blinked, moving away from Tim and toward Piotr. What stone? Under the bed, he said. That first time you came, you left one, a stone from Earth, a key to home. You left it here when you left with Kate. He said, gesturing toward her. His gruff tone gentled, though only slightly. I gave you my word I would help you, Elisa. I just assumed that you'd given me one of the tools I'd need to do that. My mind reeled. It didn't make any sense. When had I... Oh, God. I covered my mouth with my hand. I didn't realize you'd kept it, I said, my voice muffled. I barely trusted myself to speak at all as I stared at him, my stomach twisting back on itself, my eyes stinging. By the forge door, Bridget was looking at me like I was absolutely crazy, and that was the only thing that kept me from completely losing it. Well, I did, Beatrice said, then looked away from me to regard my brother again. And when the time was right, the soul remembered what the mind did not, and it led him home to you. And, that's where we'll go ahead and get started. I know I mentioned it last time, but I'll mention it again this time. I have been kind of looking forward to writing this particular section for quite a bit now. I'm kind of excited to get to this point. So, with no further ado, I'm going to get to writing. I don't know if anyone can see the chat box right now on the screen. Um, because I know I can't see it on mine, but I'm going to assume that it's there. Honestly, there's no one chatting right now, so it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, I'm not sure why that would have suddenly vanished on me here. That's the fun thing about B. Arthur. He's can be really, really scary, but most of the time he's so chill that it's just like, okay, he's default to either chill or to I'm kind of rar and I'm kind of scary. Please back off. Of course, this scene is turning out to be more difficult to write than I thought because such things are a thing, and sometimes you're at this point where you're like, I really want to just get this right. So sometimes that's one of those things that can be very difficult to overcome in the midst of a project like this is kind of sorting out things like like that, trying to figure that out. and this is where it's about to get fun because Bjarter is now about to explain some things that no one is necessarily all that aware of. Triskel probably knows at least some of it, but has never actually tried to explain it or really understands it the same way. So it'll be a little fun and interesting here. And it's not that Tim doesn't know what to do with swords and has never used swords before. He has totally done all of that before, especially in service to the Cabal, which actually has something to do with his reaction in this scenario. All right, and that is probably maybe going to be the chapter. And I will pick up with another chapter some other time. I want to thank all of you guys for joining me on my stream today. I want to also thank all my patrons on Patreon, my followers on Twitch, my followers on Facebook, and my subscribers on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me and finding what I do so interesting. If you have any questions, as always, feel free to drop me a message, tweet me on Twitter, or ping me on Facebook. Otherwise, we will see you next time. Everyone stay warm and out of the cold this snowy Wednesday evening. Have a great one. Bye.